A welcome from across the Atlantic to Greg Swenson.
Great to see you, Kevin. Great to be here.
Pleasure to have you on board, man. You're on your way to Mar-a-Lago soon, aren't you?
I don't know. Yeah. That would be fun. Nobody's knocking on my door.
Okay. Right. You should be going down there. You should go and see the big man. He's in a good mood at the moment.
I hope so.
He's in a good mood at the moment.
Yeah.
Right. In a moment, I want to talk to you about what I think is a very interesting move by Donald Trump, President-elect, and the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. Insofar as he said he's going to do a lot of things on day one, isn't he, old Donald? And one of the things he says he's going to do is he's going to immediately kick out 15,000 trans troops from the American armed forces. We'll talk about that in just a second, but I have to get your take first on Kamala Harris. Do you remember Kamala Harris? She was that person, that useless Democrat who got absolutely hammered on November the 5th by Donald Trump, the useless candidate. She's still spewing her sort of New Age claptrap, the New Age claptrap that lost her the election. But take a look at this.
I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you.
Now, Greg, you might think that she's drunk as a skunk, but I couldn't possibly comment. She's been drinking there, hasn't she?
Kevin, the press has been really funny. You know, even like the traditional conservative press that normally wouldn't get down into the gutter with stuff like that. Even they're speculating. So it's hard to watch her anyway. But it was especially hard to watch that clip from yesterday, and I just can't believe that someone in her office actually released it.
Yeah, and there's supposed to be a sort of farewell address. I mean, I think it might be a seriously final farewell address. I mean, you and I discussed this, I think it was last week, and I didn't put that much store about it, but only last week, 41% of Democrats voted for her to be their next presidential candidate. I don't think that would ever be a realistic proposition, but I would suggest after that video we just watched, if they had that vote again, she'd be lucky to get 1%.
Yeah, it wasn't a good look. And again, I could understand if, you know, she was caught in a bad moment in an interview, a live interview. But, you know, that was a pre-recorded memo. I just can't understand why they released it. It's phenomenal. Maybe they just want to bury her and just get this thing over with, you know.
They want to get rid of her. And by the way, what is she talking about again? Don't let anybody take your power away from you. I mean, she just talks in riddles and rhymes and nonsense.
It's call it reason number 500 why she lost the election. And it wasn't even close. I mean, just add this to the list. So, you know, I think her sort of verbal, you know, word salad, I mean, it was tired enough during her vice presidency, but it was especially tired on the campaign trail. So, yeah, I don't think anyone's going to miss her.
Exactly right. Now, let's move on to what I initially wanted to talk to you about. I think it's an important story, this. So Donald Trump and his defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, say that on day one, January the 20th of the Trump administration, there are 15,000 American armed forces personnel who are transgender. He says he's going to kick them out immediately. Now, a lot of people say, oh, it's prejudice, you know, transphobic. But what they're saying is, they say it's not about transphobia. It's that these people are not realistic soldiers and airmen and Navy personnel to deploy militarily. They are reliant on chemicals. They have to have chemicals every day. A, do they get those chemicals on the front line? That's dubious. And B, those chemicals are expensive. All in all, Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump say trans troops are more trouble than they're worth. We're getting rid of them. What do you make of that? My question, I think, I'm just going to ask the audience, should Britain follow suit?
Yeah, look, I think it's indicative of the pushback in America against the woke ideology, the DEI, the ESG movement. You know, it's just basically the voters have spoken and they just don't want this anymore. And the fact that the taxpayers are funding these operations and these treatments this is no wonder that morale is down in the military. The recruiting targets are at basically a 50-year low, the lowest since they eliminated the peacetime draft. So since it's been an all volunteer Army, the Army and Navy, they're at all-time lows in recruiting. So something has to change, and I think this is one of the things they're going to do to implement this change. And remember, President Trump campaigned on it, so he has every intention of executing the actual campaign promises. And so, I'm not surprised to see it. And I think, again, it's indicative of the general American pushback against the woke and the DEI movement.
Several of my American friends from California, Los Angeles, you know what they're like. They're all liberal and left-wing. They say that they're leaving America and they're coming to Britain. I say, I'll see you at the airport. I'll be going the other way. Now, you've been in the States now for a week or so, a few days. I mean, what you were just talking about, it's what we need in this country, but it's not happening in this moment. His war on woke, including this trans diktat that he's come up with. Is that resonating with Americans? I mean, my sense is that Americans, be they Democrat or Republican, be they from the provinces or be they from cities, they're sick to death of this woke nonsense. He's declared war on wokery. Is that resonating with the people?
It definitely is, Kevin. It's amazing to see, and even Democrats are just appalled with it. They're really disappointed because they felt the party was co-opted by the woke progressive left when most of the party is fairly mainstream. And so, again, it's one of the many reasons they lost the election. But this pushback is real. I mean, I think we started the woke movement here in America.
Thanks for that.
I know. Sorry about that. We exported it to the UK and the rest of the world. But I think we're also the first ones to push back. So I hope the pushback follows to the UK and the rest of the continent. You're already seeing it. Unfortunately for the UK, we've gone the other way in terms of electoral politics last summer. But, the rest of the continent is moving, rejecting net zero. You saw the breakup of the coalition in Germany 2 weeks ago. You'll have elections there. We've seen it in several other countries. So I think it's starting to come over to Europe. And it's not just the rejection of this woke ideology. It's also supply side economics, liberating the energy sector, again, the rejection of net zero. So, this movement is not going to stop. It's really positive. We're people on the street. I'm seeing MAGA hats in Manhattan, in New York City, that I never would have seen.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And, nobody's throwing eggs at those people either. So, no, it's really refreshing. Young people wearing MAGA hats. It's a really positive attitude, even here in blue New York City.
Now, one of the resolutions that Donald Trump has made, which is music to our ears, not that we're going to get any such resolution here, he's declaring war on America's massive migrant crisis, which makes ours, which is bad enough, look like a walk in the park. For estimates of how many migrants came illegally across the southern border during Biden's regime, they range from sort of 10 million to 20 million. No one's exactly sure. Now, there's a couple of aspects of this. First of all, he says they're going to be round them up, mass deportations. That sounds like a nice idea, but practically, in reality, how does he go about this? You can't just go into cities and sort of gather up people and put them into vans and take them to Mexico, can you? How does he go about that?
Look, I think the rhetoric is important because, when people might be shocked when you hear the term mass deportations, well, it's because we had a mass immigration crisis. So this is just matching, one problem with one solution. And so but practically speaking, Kevin, the capacity is probably 400,000 a year right now to deport. And, with some additional funds and personnel, we could probably get that to 600,000. So the idea of deporting 10 million, it's just not going to happen. So what's important here is we start with the gangs and we start with the drug dealers and the criminals. There's 13,000 convicted homicide felons here in the U.S. illegally, 18,000 convicted sex offenders. So, start with them. And then, of course, the human trafficking cartels, the Venezuelan drug gangs. You could start with the real bad guys and really consume, that first 400,000, 600,000 in year one. But no, don't hold your breath and think we're going to have 10 million people deported. We just don't have the facilities and the infrastructure.
But he does need it to look he needs the visuals. He's going to need it to look as if he's doing something. Let me ask you. Sorry.
And that might encourage people to voluntarily do it, right? Rather than wait till someone knocks on their door and throws them in jail. So I think this could help with the voluntary deportation.
Let me ask about the other aspect of his deportation, or his crusade against America's migrant crisis. He's saying that he's going to impose serious tariffs on Mexico and Canada, as well as China. I don't suppose China is quite as relevant in what I want to ask you. But he's saying Mexico and Canada, have very porous borders. And unless they do something about those borders and stop people pouring into the United States, he's going to hit them with massive trade tariffs, trade punishments, if you like. Now, two things about this is, how do they demonstrate that they're doing something about this? What is it that he requires Mexico and Canada to do about their borders that he can see? And secondly, if they don't do this and he does impose tariffs, these are huge trading partners with America. That will punish America. That will punish American workers as well. I mean, does this rhetoric worry you? I mean, I think a lot of times with Donald Trump, wait for the reality. What he says and what he does, there's often a big difference. But what do you feel about this? What is he going to expect Canada and Mexico to do in order not to impose tariffs on them?
Well, I think in the case of Mexico, you could just go back to his first term, and he threatened tariffs back then, and they implemented the Remain in Mexico policy, which worked. So, we've seen this movie before. We know it's functional. We know it works. So the first thing that the president of Mexico should do, Sheinbaum, is to reestablish the Remain in Mexico policy. The second thing that she should do, which is probably new, is actually fight against the human trafficking cartels and the drug cartels. Right now, Mexico is basically controlled by those cartels, and the president and her party are basically afraid of them. So, she might have to show some leadership here and actually fight against that. The alternative is tariffs, which would be destructive for her and for her country. And nobody really wants that. And I think, as Errol pointed out last night, we'd rather not have cheap avocados coming from Mexico if we can eliminate the fentanyl coming over, killing 100,000 people every year in America. So this is important stuff. And if it means there's going to be some, elevated prices again on cheap produce or cheap manufactured goods coming from Mexico or Canada, so be it. We do import a lot of oil from Canada. It's more important to Canada than it is to us because we're the #1 buyer of their oil, but we have plenty of oil ourselves. So if I'm Justin Trudeau, I'm listening and I'm moving. And the next thing, Kevin, already President Sheinbaum has come out and said she's going to address the fentanyl crisis. So, Trump's not even president yet, and the threats of tariffs are already working.
Yeah, and by the way, let's remember last year, I think it was 100,000 Americans, and more than 100,000 Americans died of fentanyl.
A year.
It is a real scourge. Greg, when are you coming back?
I will be back probably early next week.
All right. Well, enjoy New York. Get yourself down to Mar-a-Lago. He's still appointing people. He could maybe give you a job.